Are you in danger for exposing all this?
I might be. The Brady Bunch 3-episode arc where they go to Hawaii was an allegory for the Vietnam War. Buckle up. These episodes aired in the autumn of 1972 when America was in the thick of the war in Vietnam. America's most wholesome, famous family was thrust into a distant land of which they knew very little, but they just went over there. The Vietnam War was said to be about containing communism, but we know now that it was about America's trade and economic influence in the region, as well as our access to materials like rubber and tin and other minerals. And Thomas, what was the taboo doll made of? Other minerals. Read between the lines. And why were the Bradys shipped to Hawaii in the first place? Because of Mike's corporate interests in building over in that strange land. There were military bases, obviously saw their tour of Pearl Harbor and Mike Brady's whole treatise about the USS Arizona. Speaking of the military, in the first episode, Mike didn't ask the Brady kids if they wanted to go to Hawaii. He told them they were going to Hawaii. You know what that sounds like, Thomas? Sounds a little something called the Selective Service. The Brady kids were not asked to go to Hawaii. They were drafted to go to Hawaii. And what was the theme of the Hawaii episodes? Escapism and American idealism in the face of chaos. See, Americans were living the good life in the 50s and 60s. We thought we had it all great. And it was our hubris that sent us over to Vietnam thinking that everything would be okay. But we were met with the harsh realities of danger lurking beneath the surface, whether it was the Viet Cong or the Tet Offensive or a tarantula in Jan's tote bag or Greg's surfing wipeout. Speaking of Greg's surfing wipeout, where he suffered a tragic accident just off the coast, you ever hear of a little something called the Gulf of Tonkin incident? Look it up, Thomas, because that's what Mike's wipeout represented. Then we have the generational divide. Mike and Carol were so consumed with the status quo and material luxuries, like their fancy coral jewelry. It was the Brady kids, the youth of the early 70s, that were awakened to the existential threat lurking beneath the seemingly idyllic setting. And what do the Bradys do to solve their problems? They send the young men off into the jungle to wage a war fraught with peril. Greg almost died in a surfing accident. The boys desecrated an ancient artifact in a construction site. They openly mock the way the indigenous people talk and act, and they pay the price. There you have it. The boys were the soldiers in the jungle waging an unpopular war. America's hubris comes back to haunt us. The generational divide of a nation and a family in peril, and the lost innocence under the backdrop of an escapist utopia. And finally, Thomas, who is the very famous man who wrote and directed the 1986 Academy Award-winning film Platoon about the Vietnam War?
My good friend Oliver Stone.
Exactly. And who was Vincent Price's only friend inside the cave in those episodes? It was the Tiki doll, Oliver, who was made out of stone. Ladies and gentlemen, the Brady Bunch 3-episode arc where they go to Hawaii was an allegory for the Vietnam War.